that someone's doorbell?
No, that's Zoom.
I know.
Okay, we'll wait a couple more minutes.
I know last week where they had the CDBG general discussion on stuff. There's potentially some money unspent. Did any of that by chance not get spent and pushed to the Ridge Street CDBG allocation?
So the Ridge Street, it's still budgeted at 150,000.
Right.
We'll have to wait and see how Planning Commission and City Council approve the budget. If we do get more entitlement award next year than what we're expecting, that number could go up. So that 150,000 could go up. Does that make sense?
Could go up, right? But usually the other CDBG programs have first dibs on it, you might say.
Yeah, once the task force makes the recommendation,
then
we have to wait.
They might recommend to give the Ridge Street group, our group, a little bit more money, but yeah, okay, it's in somebody else's hands. Okay, just didn't know how all that kind of decision making and money allocation works to potentially increase the amount of money that we all have to work with. So, all right.
But was your question, is there any left over from the Belmont Carlton funding that was last year and the 2 years before? Was there any money left over?
That I'm not sure about.
Aaron, I guess.
I could check.
It would be great if there was any leftovers to land in our pot of money.
Are you asking about the
I like your world
Belmont
map.
CDBG?
Yeah.
So the Belmont CDBG funding has all been allocated to the Franklin Street Sidewalk project.
Okay. So it's gone.
Yes.
Well, wishful thinking on my part. So is that 150,000 that you just mentioned, is that just for 1 year or is that for 3?
It's just for 1 year.
3 years.
1 year.
Oh, good. Okay.
And that'd be year 2 at the moment because we have $200,000 allocated for this year, right?
Yes.
Fiscal year being July 1st through June 30th.
Correct. So it looks like we do have more people joining in. I'm going to go ahead and do roll call real quick. Chris Meyer.
Here.
Kathy Johnson Harris.
Here.
Katie Rupnick.
Here.
Kim Spalding. I think you're muted, Kim. Oh, you're gone, but you're here.
Yeah,
Pat
I'm here.
Lloyd. Got you.
Here. Hey, Kim.
Hey, Pat.
Audrey Oliver.
Here.
Gotcha. And then Tania, we're missing Tania. Okay. Alrighty, did we have a chance to look over the minutes that I sent a couple weeks back ago now?
Yes.
Any changes or additions, or are we good to go on those?
I move that the
I'm
minutes
okay.
accepted. I move that the minutes be accepted as written.
Second.
Okay, awesome. And then next, so we're still in the stage of discussing task force priorities and project ideas. I'm gonna really let you guys do most of the talking today. I did ask Mr. Brennan Duncan to join us. He's the city's traffic engineer, but I'm gonna turn it over to you guys.
I want to know how the walkthrough went. The walking tour.
Most informative. It was great to have Chris's input as I learned a lot. We did look at your corner, Kim, and the sidewalk issue there. Lots
Right.
of sidewalk issues, lots of speeding, traffic issues, and bus shelter issues.
Good.
Yeah, it was nice to have Tania join us, who we learned that grew up again on the street, even though she's
Yeah.
off of it recently. So she was able to offer. I learned a lot her about the history also, and who lived where, and when things expanded, how roads got moved around and opened up, etc. too. So that was also very helpful. We got to see firsthand some of the traffic challenges also. And we were there 3 to 5 on a Friday, so wasn't peak rush hour yet, you might say, but definitely saw some of the constricting points, some of the intersections where the sight lines aren't great. Definitely got a good look at the 5th Street and Ridge intersection and the crosswalk there and the challenges there, and also Elliott and what's the street coming out of the Elliott Commons, right there, Burnett Commons, that intersection there.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, Pat or Aaron, did you have any other observations from the walk? I mean, things that, of course, I think most of you all know about also. But
Yeah.
I think you guys covered it. We talked a lot about sidewalks. You guys mentioned some need for maybe reflectors for the crosswalk. And then we talked to some residents on Ridge Street who said that sidewalks are a big plus, and that's why they moved back to Ridge Street, because of sidewalks. The new neighborhood that they were at before or previously didn't have sidewalks, so they came back.
I don't know what the word you keep saying.
Pardon?
Sidewalks? I don't know what you're saying.
Sidewalks?
Sidewalks, okay.
Yes.
Should she say it in Espanol?
See,
Aaron, if I understand correctly, our goal by the end of this meeting in the next 45, 50 minutes is to have a draft preliminary list of projects for this fiscal year, and that we might also think about for a longer term.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. I also noted in the meeting documents, you provided a list of existing projects that have been done.
Yeah.
Right. And then in the meeting documents also was the list of the survey results that kind of highlighted people's concerns and ideas for projects too. Right?
Yep.
I have a question. Fifth Street, how much of that would VDOT be responsible for?
Any improvements like a crosswalk or lightings or signs or anything?
Anything?
During that-
So
this area?
VDOT, this is Brennan Duncan, the traffic engineer. VDOT does not own or maintain any of the city streets. So any improvements, we can apply for state funding, but they are still city streets.
So the entrance corridor, which is Fifth Street Extended, is considered a street and not a thoroughfare way.
Correct. Yep. Even 250 going around the city is a city street that the city owns and maintains.
Oh, interesting.
So given what discussed on Monday about Fifth Street and improvements there, I assume that there would be city money to take care of those improvements. Is that correct?
That depends on council and what they would like to help fund. Currently, we've been going after those state funds to do the large improvements, but it's a long time frame to go through that whole process of applying, receiving the funds, and then constructing. It can be upwards of 10 to 15 years. So in order to accelerate that process, we would have to have city council or some other local fund source allocate money towards those improvements.
So, but I think if we're thinking about Fifth Street and our unfortunately small pot of money, $200,000 this year, we're talking, if we wanted to do something about Fifth Street, in the realm of things we could do, we're talking like a crosswalk, some signage or something like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the crosswalk is, that would definitely be within the budget. The only recommendation that I made Monday that would probably fall within the, threshold of capital that we have with CDBG would be the intersection lighting, improving the intersection lighting. That was, I think I put 30 to 50,000 per intersection. So, if we improve the lighting at, Brookwood and Cleveland and Bailey and Old Ridge, that may be something that could be funded through CDBG. There wouldn't be enough funds there to put pedestrian scale lighting all the way down the road, but lighting those intersections so that at night, you can see when people are pulling out or whatnot, would be something if it's something that the group wanted to do.
On the Belmont Bridge, there is a flashing light to indicate people are crossing. Is that something that could be considered? Because I remember when I was on a similar committee, I requested that they do something and they put the X's in the road. Well, nobody halfway, especially at rush hour, watches those things. So could we have something like a flashing sign if that is at all possible? And I kind of think that shouldn't come out of our money. It should be something that city council would allot, in my opinion. And then the other question that I have about funding, do they still have the sidewalk fund, or is that something that has gone by the wayside? Neighborhood development.
Yeah.
Okay.
So both yes to both of those. The rapid flashing beacon that is on the Belmont Bridge where you can push it as a pedestrian. One of my recommendations was to remove the crosswalk at Old Ridge, but City Council did not like that. They want me to come back with alternatives to make it safer. So we will probably do an evaluation of that crosswalk it may have to be delayed until spring or summer, because if I do pedestrian counts now when it's colder and people aren't necessarily out, going to and from Tonsler Park, the numbers might not be favorable, to actually warrant, putting one in. So, but it is something that I'm looking at for that location. Were you talking about any place else on the corridor or just that existing crosswalk?
That existing crosswalk, and you pointed out to Tonsler Park, a lot of people work in this area and walk to UVA.
Okay.
It is, and I know from going through there at 8 o'clock in the morning, anywhere from 7 a.m. to about 9:30, you see a pretty steady flow of people crossing over. And most of them are adults, although kids sometimes just plow through. And that's why the little girl was hit. And I think is still suffering from some injury because of it. So.
Well, Ms. Harris, I totally agree with you that I think the city should pony up the money for the improvements there. And I think given what went on at city council meeting, it seems like there are a lot of folks in the neighborhood and in the city who, signed a petition, are pressuring city council to come up with some solutions there. And I think they were discussed by the traffic engineer. So hopefully the city can take on that responsibility, which would ease our commitment to doing that, where the money that's in our pot, we can use to upgrade the structures within the Ridge Street neighborhood. There's lots of folks that walk these sidewalks, lots of folks that wait for buses in, I must say, come downtown, don't look as nice as the ones in North Downtown. And I'm very concerned about some of our elderly folks who are trying to get here and there, and they're waiting in the rain, they're waiting in the cold for their buses to come.
And you might add,
So I'd rather have,
excuse me, not only are they waiting, they're standing.
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, right there on my corner. It's a very active bus stop. And there's no place to sit. They took out the bench when I first moved in, and I asked over and over and over again, are you going to replace the bench? No, we have a new bench down the street, which of course the bus doesn't even use.
Well, the bench that they're talking about was put in when the bus came down Raymond Road and went up Brookwood Lane.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very dangerous.
But that is not being used, and yet they didn't replace
it's being used, but we could move it. You're right, but it actually is being used. But the bus, yeah, the bus situation is best for the bus people.
So, Aaron or Brendan, I don't know, bus stops, of course, shelters cost more than a bench. What are we talking about? And, and would we need to make more space? Because it seems like some of those sidewalks are pretty narrow. How would that work? Would we have to punch some stuff out into the street? And could that act also as a slowing mechanism? How's getting, yeah, sorry. But to give us an idea of, how many bus stops we might get for $200,000 or 100,000, I don't know. What are we talking about?
Should we be paying for bus stops?
Well, I agree there, Kim. We can decide we don't, but unfortunately, I don't think the city council is probably going to prioritize bus stops, at least my read of things, unfortunately, at the moment. So,
yeah, I mean, I think to Chris's point, this money is really to pay for those priorities that are the neighborhood's priorities that might not be all the way up at the top of the city's priorities. So, if there's a bus stop that you guys really want, like, this is your opportunity to get it when, you may not have it based on the greater city priorities. To your point about cost, I'm not the transit guy. I don't necessarily have that in my back pocket, but I think, a traditional bus stop, like covered bus stop and everything, I want to say it's in the $10,000 range, maybe 15, for the structure and pouring the concrete pad, the foundation and everything. So I think it's somewhere in that range.
I may be naive, but the city talks about workforce development. They talk about walkability. They talk about transportation with CAT. They want all of these things. Our neighborhood is diverse. I mentioned to you 30% of the people make under minimum wage. And the city cannot we talk about affordable housing. What good is affordable housing when you can't go to work and pay for it? We have people in this community, because if you all look at the history of Ridge Street, it was predominantly almost 75% African American. And then we had other situations, but it appears that we are always put on the back burner. Now, I understand that we have some money, but there's so many other things that we could do with that money and prepare people to be able to go to work and utilize some of the funds other ways. I can't see us paying for that. The city should pay for that. And whoever started petitions should truly be starting a petition for that. I haven't seen a petition, but whoever the petition pusher is, that's one that could be done. And I'd be willing to walk around with, well, not during the COVID, but I would be willing to sign it.
Okay. For Katie, go ahead. Not that I'm trying to run.
Erin, do we have a list of current projects that we've put together based on the feedback that you received from the survey? I was thinking maybe, if we're trying to really get a list together by the end of the meeting today, maybe we could just talk about some of the high level items and then look at what our list says and narrow those down based on what we think would be best, for city council funds to be used for based on what we have available with our CBDG funds.
I've just been taking notes based on today's discussion. This is the survey results from the previous homework assignment. So you guys can open that up and look along as we're continuing this discussion. But so far I've written down what we've just recently just talked about. I did send Garland Williams, the CAT director, these notes as well. I can try to see if we can get someone from transit to join our next meeting, if that's something of interest to you guys.
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Sorry, transit's responsible, for example, for installing bus shelters.
Correct.
Okay. And would know how much a bus shelter or a bench, et cetera, would cost. Okay.
Yeah.
So Erin, I went through the survey results that you sent out to us, and the things that had the most votes, as it were traffic speeding, sidewalks, I'm going to call it accessibility, safety, and the most mentioned solution was traffic calming. So given what you put as, the number of votes, like under access, Ix Park got two mentions.
Right. Yeah, what you've got up here right now, I don't know that had the most votes. Ridge Street Taskforce project list.
Well,
Lighting improvements along 5th Street. Was that something we actually said?
This is just based on our discussion so far. This can obviously change.
Okay.
Yes.
So Brendan, is traffic calming, or how would you go about traffic calming on Ridge Street, for example?
Yes.
And how much would that cost? What are those solutions?
So I think traffic calming on Ridge Street is a complicated issue because the bus routes are on there. So for instance, we don't put speed bumps, or we try not to put speed bumps on, bus routes, because it adds to wear and tear of the city buses and stuff. As well as Ridge Street is already fairly narrow. It's, if I measure it on my screen here.
Narrow because of all the parking.
Right. So the roadway is about 31 feet right now, which is wide enough for parking on one side, but not both, even though we have parking on both sides. So, to really do full traffic calming there, you would want to remove parking on one side and, do like a full bump out and that kind of stuff to narrow the physical travel way, but keep it a consistent width. I think the issue right now is you have the sporadic parking on both sides. So there's times where, as a driver, I have 30 feet of pavement and I feel very comfortable to speed. And then you come up and you may have cars on both sides of the road. And now, that 30 feet is neck down to 15 feet, which isn't really wide enough for two vehicles to pass. So it's, it's a complicated issue to try and address. I mean, we can do some easy measures, like throwing up a your speed is, flashing, blinking sign or something.
I think that would be excellent.
But we do have a policy. We only put one of those every quarter or half mile, I believe. So there would be one of them on the entire street. So we're not going to put one every block or every other house.
No, but if you could put it on, we're talking really what? The numbers are important here. So because the old Bridge Street starts at 600 and goes down to 1,000 and something. So obviously the 1,000 block, a lot of people speed on that, but it is a dead end.
Right.
And then you've got parking on both sides of the street on part of that, which is really kind of the 900 block area. Then further down in the 800 and the 700s, that's really parking on only one side of the street. So it varies.
So Brendan, if I've heard you talk about this previously too, is the fact that there's parked cars on each side and there's a narrow street functions kind of indirectly to make people slow down, right? So almost how you have the parking set up to a certain extent is a non-physical way, or at least regarding, let's say, putting a speed bump in, for example, comparatively to slow down the street.
Right. So, I think the more vehicles you have parked on a roadway, the more it acts as traffic calming. When you have sporadic vehicles and you have larger stretches where the pavement gets really wide, is where you can end up with, it feels a lot more comfortable to speed. So, I'm not sure what the solution particularly would be in this location. We could do, all in the spaces where there is only parking on one side of the road, if we alternated the parking from one side to the other to create kind of a slalom situation where people just can't go straight. You kind of have to, move back and forth across the roadway. That's an option that we could look at. Yeah, I mean, there are options we could do there. Not all of them would cost very much money, but we would need to kind of get the neighborhood's opinion on how they would like to move forward. And that's really what we've done with most of our traffic calming throughout the city is we put together, 2 or 3 options, and then the citizens on that street vote on which option it is they would like to move forward.
So that sounds like maybe a possibility for Brook Drive, which is high traffic, high speed area.
Well, also sounds good for Ridge Street. I mean, Brookwood, they've got parking on both sides of the street and it's an obstacle course.
Yeah, Brookwood really shouldn't have parking on either side of the street, to be honest.
Correct.
Yeah, because it's already a meander as it goes down and up the hill, because you can't see. You can't
Well,
see.
and it's just not wide enough. You know, it's yeah, it's not wide enough for parking. It really shouldn't have parking, and you know, the units, especially on the lower end, closer to Fifth Street. You know, those driveways are so close together. I don't know how you can physically park on the street without blocking someone's driveway.
Well, if you ride up Brookwood, there are no parking signs. People park anyway and the police pass them by.
Yeah.
So they do.
Yeah, there no parking on both sides of the street.
Yeah, and
No park.
And the silly thing is that they have driveways and garages.
also we need to look at Raymond Road too, because a lot of people speed down Raymond Road and it's parking only on one side some days. And we need to look at sidewalks on Raymond Road.
So yeah, Ms. Harris, I think that was an interesting, some of the, I think that maybe people feel like there's a lot of speeding because there's not maybe good sidewalks, thus they're really close to traffic or cars. Sidewalks is something it seemed like was also a popular request.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And again, Pat, when we talked about it like at the top, I think there was a request that wasn't funded as part of the SIA section. Maybe I saw that somewhere where, or at least this is what they were doing over Belmont, but trying to guarantee that at least there's sidewalk on one side of the road.
Right. Raymond Road has sidewalk on one side of the road. Sometimes you have to swap over to the other side, but
in some instances in the neighborhood, there's none, which is, I think we probably want to at least have one. Sidewalk is expensive. It was like 5,400 linear feet of sidewalk costs like $86,000 or something like that.
But isn't there a fund? Aaron didn't answer.
There is a city sidewalk fund, but there's also a city priority list that is being worked through. So again, I don't disagree with you that, you know, the city should fund sidewalks. That's not necessarily something, you know, it is a city function, but the city has priorities in other locations that they're working on. So, you know, I'll say it again, like this is your opportunity that you can, with this pot of money, you can move that up the list and say, yes, but it's a priority for our neighborhood. And so we're gonna fund that.
Are you saying we're gonna fund it or move it up on the list that the?
I'm saying that you guys would fund it. Yeah. That by funding it, you're moving it up the list and saying, we're gonna pay for it, we want it done now.
Out of our pot of money.
Right.
Or contribute significant parts to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at locations for sidewalk, I mean, do you look, for instance, at where Baylor kind of comes into to Raymond and Woodfork, you know, there's a sidewalk gap there. I would try, again, this is me. I don't want to put this, you know, talk for you, but those are the types of projects that I would try and focus on, is closing those gaps where, you know, there's just, you have sidewalk coming from both directions and then there's just nothing there. You know, those types of projects kind of help fill the gap and make it so that people can use the sidewalk, because otherwise you have a sidewalk to nowhere.
So Brennan, do you have the ability, if we were, I know that Aaron has sent out a number of maps that show what we mean in terms of space when we're talking about the Ridge Street neighborhood and what streets and areas we're looking at. Do you have GIS or some type of other data that shows where there's discontinuous sidewalks or where there's existing infrastructure and where there aren't sidewalks? I mean, that's one way that we could look at what we have, where we think there's gaps, and then if there's other funding that could be leveraged to improve sidewalk conditions.
I believe the city does have that information. Aaron, if you want to make a note to check with Bob Brown.
Okay.
I believe that if we don't have it in a specific map for this area, I think we can create one fairly easily. I know that the city just recently did a survey of all of our streets that located. It was mainly to assess pavement condition. But with it, they, surveyed where all of our signs are at, where all of our sidewalks are at, and that kind of stuff. So we do have that information.
It just seems to me that if we are looking at sidewalks and, where the gaps are, we should also somehow be able to do some sort of a study as to usage so that we're going to complete a sidewalk where it's really needed.
I agree, Kim. Yeah, that if we decide a sidewalk, complete sidewalk, let's make sure that it's a sidewalk that is high usage.
Would the city have that data too? Or if, is that something that we would have to use our funds for a sidewalk study, or are there other funds available that could be used for that?
I do not believe the city has that data as far as, what sidewalks are used or not used. And I think that it would be maybe a little bit skewed as well, because how do you use a sidewalk that isn't there?
But yeah, I would just say on that, I think we all know from our living in the neighborhood, right, what's
Right.
used and what's not. So I would hesitate about paying for something that, when we have our own local knowledge to, I think, hopefully fill the gaps. Not that of course it can help. So I'm just saying here, we have a list here. Do we feel like not that we have to make decisions, I guess, today, but do we feel like we're getting close to prioritizing anything? Should we try to prioritize things?
So when I'm looking at the other lists or the documents that Aaron sent out, there's a couple other areas where I think team members identified projects that they wanted to prioritize in terms of neighborhood amenities. Some of these overlap with the traffic. There were some safety, lighting, and trash concerns. And then also housing was something that was brought up that I feel like we haven't really discussed in any detail today. So maybe we could just talk about that and, have some potentially representative projects of each of these different sectors that have been identified.
Yeah, I find that
I think with
is a hard one to tackle with $200,000 as our maximum money.
Sorry, with housing?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think that the idea was though that you could seed, for example, Habitat Humanities, who's already has money, and subsidize or support a little bit with $25,000-$50,000 to rehab one of the blighted houses, for example. And so with just our $25,000 or $50,000, you could get them to spend $200,000, and then I think the idea that got tossed around was transition somebody out of South First Street into using Habitat's program for home ownership, into turn one of the blighted houses into an affordable house in the neighborhood. But that also will require, Aaron, I think you sent a list around, sorry, diving a little bit more into this housing question. We have to figure out how to get those houses, right?
Correct.
And there's not a mechanism.
privately owned.
right. Yeah, the two that I brought up, Ms. Harris said are privately owned, and so they're not really available.
Okay. So unfortunately, I guess until Aaron's team over at the city can figure out how we can force those people to sell us the properties, we don't really have, I think, an angle on at least trying to rehab some of those blighted houses as a housing solution. Now, was there another housing idea out there that and Katie, to get your point, or Kim or anybody else that?
Yeah.
And
Well, in my opinion, we don't want to try to force anybody to sell us anything. If anything, we want to offer them maybe, if it's a house that needs painting, we offer them paint. If there is something, we offer them at a discount. But some of these people that you all are pointing at have been in this community since the 1800s. So I would be very careful in us pinpointing property that we want to get them to sell, because I think that they are well aware that they could sell it, given all of the development that has occurred on Raymond, Brookwood, and Baylor. But we want to make them happy neighbors, not, and in this case, we'd probably be gentrifying. So I think we need to reword that, and possibly look at some of the money being put aside to help rehab, or, help people improve their area, but not to sell it. Because I think they would have had a sign up long ago if that was an interest that they had.
So Ms. Harris, at that point, the homes that have been boarded up, I think are the ones we're referring to, that aren't being lived in.
And I'm very much aware of those. And they are owned by people who have been in the neighborhood for years. I think I don't want to call any numbers or names, but I probably could walk you straight to what you're talking about. Now, only one of them that I recall in this situation was one that caught fire and is boarded up. That one could be, somebody could approach the owners or let them know that their money is available for rehab.
Maybe you could give that that house number to Erin. Just suggesting.
She already is aware of it.
Oh, okay, good.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Harris, you did mention rehab. We want to talk to, say, you have Albemarle Home Improvement Program, AHIP, who does a lot of rehabs. Talk to them about coming in and working with those properties. Then is what you're saying. I mean, it's a lot of money potentially for people who aren't living here anymore. Again, because families seems to like it, they moved away, but would be a way to resolve that issue. I think it sounds like, or that challenge we're saying.
But maybe they would rehab it and rent it to someone who is still here. We don't know. But I do think that we possibly could look at rehab.
So that sounds like it's something we need to, it would take some time to, again, track down these owners, figure out what they're interested in, willing or wanting to do. My assumption is if someone was going to say, I'm going to give you $50,000 to rehab your house, they're going to say, sure. Please, let's do that. But then I think we would all need to be clear about, or there's maybe rules also, Aaron, I don't know about, regarding kind of what's the obligation they have then to, again, let's say rent to a low income household, take a housing choice voucher or something like that. If I'm to keep it affordable and not say move it up to a high rent.
And let's back up a little bit. I don't think we would give anybody $50,000. I think there are incentives that could be used in these situations. I'm not thinking that we would take $50,000 and dump on, if we have it like that, you could throw it my way. We need to think about it. We need to look at a creative way to approach the individuals. And I think that the city could help us do that.
Well, I guess, Aaron, then do you know, this is your department, what are those creative ways at the moment, the tools you have at the moment, I think, to get at what Ms. Harris, and what are some price ranges around those things?
So we do have the free paint program. Anyone who is income eligible can apply for this program to get paint to make paint improvements at their home. As far as rehab, we don't really have a city rehab program. We usually partner with AHIP or Habitat. If the task force wanted to put together a program using Ridge Street CDBG dollars for homeowner rehab, that is something we could explore. Housing projects in the past that have used priority neighborhood funding typically did partner with a housing agency. I know CRHA in the past paired up with one of the priority neighborhoods to offer down payment assistance. That was one of the programs they chose to fund. So, I mean, this is something we could explore further if the task force does want to prioritize this. It would just be a matter of how much funding does the task force want to set aside, and then setting up a program.
I keep thinking about the bus stops and the extraordinary cost of possibly $10,000 to put a sheltered bus stop up. Wondering if one of these groups, AHIP or whoever, is able to do something like that for less price, community involvement, etc. I mean, why is it that we have to pay $10,000 for something as simple as putting up a shelter and putting a bench in there? Just seems over the top and unnecessary.
So Aaron, is there a way that we could look at this preliminary list that we've put together and identify if there's an overlap with existing city funds, just to see where we could, leverage funding from other sources and where city funds aren't available, that might help us prioritize, maybe, just a thought.
Yeah, I can definitely start adding in, once this meeting is over, where extra city funds can be located, and then send that to you guys.
I think another thing we might want to think about with this list, I think it's a great list. And obviously all of these things would be wonderful to have and start doing. But which of these things, and it could be more than one, are we going to get a bigger bang for our buck? In other words, if we put up bus shelters, how many of our neighbors are going to benefit from that? If we move on Fifth Street, how many of our actual neighbors are going to benefit from that? Or is people that are just driving to and from on Fifth Street? So that would be something I would really like to think about, because these are funds that are for our neighborhood.
Right. Yeah, if we're prioritizing on this list, I'd in the sidewalk thing and we got the traffic calming, but the sidewalk thing, I'm still vying for this corner of sort of corner of Ridge and Brookwood, because I mean, from my house, I see all these people walking out in the street with the dogs and the strollers and all of this. I mean, there's a lot of people using that area where they have to be out in the street. And the traffic is pretty busy at that intersection.
So, Aaron, you had a list of what $200,000 could buy. I think slide up. Not to
Yes.
Kim, to try to figure out, for example, Kim, that stretch there, I think where you're talking about that you just listed is 200 feet of sidewalk.
Yeah, it's not a big stretch. It's over one person's complete front of their house and then part of actually my lot.
So it looks like it's $110 a foot. So 200 feet of that would be $20,000, $22,000 to put that stretch of sidewalk in, if I understand this correctly, right?
And that location would probably be a little bit more just because I think there would be a small retaining wall needed based on the slope right there. But
We'll call it 25 because we're going to get a deal on the retaining wall. And Brendan's going to go out there and put some free labor in.
Oh, I'll come home. I'll come back from Mexico and make it at least match the rest of the wall I put in.
All right. It looks like in something that, well, the street lights, if you wanted to have some street lights on Fifth Street and some of those intersections, again, $2,500. You know, might be something we could include or would want to do to make sure it gets done sooner rather than later. Unless Brendan, you're going to tell me that's going to be done in the next 6 months anyways, because council's focused on it at the moment.
you're talking along Fifth Street itself, like the main Fifth Street.
Yeah.
I do not. I think that $2,500 a light, that's more the coming off of a power pole. That's not the cost for like a pedestrian scale light.
Dedicated. Okay.
So, but yeah, I do not see them doing the lighting first, but hey, I have no clue as to what council is going to decide is their priority for Fifth Street at this point.
Okay.
So
You know,
is my
there's-
understanding that they're just going to drop the speed limit just 5 miles per hour at 40.
Yes, that's what we're going to do along with signage along there for right now.
So can I suggest, because I'm looking at 8 more minutes and my wife's going to call me to go out and make dinner and start feeding the kids. Fast, right, everybody.
Good for you.
And feel free to take the conversation beyond this, but not that I'm wedded to this, but would it make sense to try and say, let's say we want to spend $100,000 this year on traffic and sidewalk improvements and $100,000 on housing? Just to kind of narrow us down.
No,
It's, or does somebody,
no,
it's not there, okay,
I'm saying no.
all right.
I'm saying no with you.
You know, I'm gonna go
What's the
back.
housing?
I'm going back to the bang for buck. How can we spend our money that will help and support most of our neighbors?
So do
And
we,
I spots and bus stops.
okay, so sidewalks and bus stops. Okay, so spend, and I'm fine with it.
Benches.
I'm not wedded to the housing rehab and whatever. And trust me, LEAP, I'm not suggesting we spend any money through LEAP either. Okay, I have plenty of money to spend on the neighborhood for energy efficiency rehabs, for example. But okay, so $200,000 on sidewalks. I'm good with that. And sidewalks and bus stops, other traffic calming, lighting, et cetera, things to be further determined.
So when you're talking about adding sidewalks, are you also looking at the handicap accessibility? And I'm talking about wheelchair accessibility as well, because a lot of sidewalks are coming up without handicap accessibility. So I hope you're including that in your sidewalks.
I think it's pretty standard at the moment that you make sure that any new sidewalks built, the spec would require, I think what you're talking about, a landing ramp up and down for accessibility.
For people to get to be able to enter on and off of the sidewalks. And we're seeing a lot that's not happening. It's just like straight sidewalks that are coming in a lot of places. So even though you think it's something that they automatically do, it isn't. So make sure that you include that in your sidewalks, because that's important. And two, I have a second question about the boarded houses on Ridge Street. I want to know, are those folks that own those properties, are they paying taxes? Because it sounds like they own the properties, and so in order for them to be owning the properties and the city hasn't done anything about it, I'm sure that it sounds like they're paying taxes. So can anybody answer that question? Are they paying taxes on that property?
Yeah,
Yes, I sent you guys a list. They are paying taxes, as well as they're up to their current with code enforcement or building, what is it, code enforcement violation standards as well.
All right, so is there any way that conversation could be, somebody can have conversation with the owners to talk to them about, you know, what is it that they would like to do with the property, and see if there's funds out there for them to get help to do whatever it is they need to do with the property to bring it up to code, and even if that means offering it to folks who are Section 8 participants or public housing or anybody who's low income in the city of Charlotte.
Aaron,
Yes.
do you know, again, getting to guess to that, as some people are behind on their taxes, some are up to date. Has there been conversations with some of the ability to talk to them at all, or not? Or
So I can ask and see if we can try to reach out to the homeowners. I think Ms. Johnson Harris, you might know some of them as well. And some task force members also know the homeowners. That's another outlet we can try to reach out to them through. But I could also try through my end.
okay. So it does, if I heard, well, Audrey, your point was, if we're going to put some sidewalks in, definitely make sure they're accessible for disabled people and meet codes, and right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Kim, I heard you prioritizing sidewalk and bus improvements. I think identified at least the sidewalk near Kim's house on that corner as being one that definitely would be.
Yeah, it does. It at the corner, it has accessibility on both sides of the street. So that's, you know, that part is done. It's just that patch in the middle where nobody can, there's nothing there, and then there's cars parked along there, so they have to go out into the street.
And recall that patch that you're talking about by your house,
Yeah,
the other side is a patch also.
right. There's two
Yeah.
there's two houses on the other side that have no sidewalk. So there's, you know, there's no option there except to walk in the street.
So could our homework be to identify the exact locations where we would want sidewalks to be done, and exact locations where we'd want bus stops and shelters and bus shelters to be put in?
Sure, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think
Not
that
to
would
say
benefit the
before
most.
but trying to, again, and again, Audrey making that. Miss Johnson Harris, was there a priority that you wanted to see done? Is that taking care of some of your concerns also?
You can call me Kathy. At this time, I'm with what you suggested.
Okay.
Great.
I know, Kathy, I think you mentioned the lighting at the intersections of Fifth Street, and I hope we can see how that plays out in council here, and what Brennan is going to be presenting, and they're going to tell them to do. And I do think that would be also, again, it seemed like a good thing to maybe spend some money on also within reach of our budget. if they decide not to do it, unfortunately. All right. Ketty, did we miss anything from you, or how are you feeling?
Nope, I think that takes care of some of the concerns that I have. I live on Langford Avenue, so I think that, I share a lot of the concerns that we've talked about today. I'm just glad that we could narrow this down in an hour. That is a feat for everyone, so good job.
So Aaron, just next steps, it sounds like we're supposed to have a meeting in a month, all right?
Yes, I'll look for a date in December and send you guys the agenda. I do want to quickly do public comment.
Well, just for us, it sounds like we need to send you some spots on where we want the bus things to be built, right?
Yeah, so I'll ask you guys to send that to me a week in advance the meeting, before the meeting.
Okay, and try to identify the stretches where we want sidewalks done.
Correct, and I'll send you guys the list that you guys requested me.
Okay, and that way we can have hopefully a good idea of all the more specific things we want to get done and the cost, and make sure it's within the budget, or if it's not, then we need to prioritize which stretch of sidewalks or which bus stops, etc. Right?
Great.
Sounds good.
Yay.
Alrighty, if we have any
Aaron,
members.
Thanks, Chris.
Aaron, can I add one more thing really quick?
Yes, Brendan.
When you all are kind of looking at the bus stop locations, maybe try and contact the property owners right in front, because I'm guessing that we will have to purchase at least a little plot of land to install those. So, working with property owners, just because the back of the sidewalk is really probably the property line. And so there's not generally a lot of room to install a bus stop, which is probably why there aren't many there. So having a property owner who's willing to work with the city to acquire that land is helpful. So just as you're doing that kind of exercise of figuring out where you want those, if you know any of those property owners, maybe send them an email or give them a call and have that discussion with them.
I don't
Well,
feel
I'm one of
comfortable
them.
doing that other than with Cam. I don't know who
I'm
those
one of
people
them. I'm
are.
in the
I
corner
have
of-
no idea how to
I'm
get a
the
hold
one
of
with
them.
I'm the one with the missing, I'm on the corner, so I don't think that you're gonna need to come into my land anymore, because that there was a bench there before.
Okay.
And Brendan, sorry, just on this point, because potentially negotiating with some sounds like might be difficult to get their land, even though it might be 6 square feet or something like that. Is it an option to push the sidewalk or the pad into the street?
It's possible. Again, we would have to remove parking in those locations more than likely, but that is an option. So especially if we're looking at kind of chicaning the roadway for traffic calming, that type of shifting it over would be an option.
Also would potentially help on the traffic calming. All right. Wow, we can do 2 things at once.
Thanks, Chris.
All right.
Alrighty, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Any members of the audience, if you would like to speak to this task force, you can raise your hand or press *9 if you're calling via phone.
Mr. or Mrs. Martin wanted to say something.
It looks.
Can you manually unmute them? There they are.
Mr. Martin, did you want to speak with the task force? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Brian's probably just playing the mute, unmute, mute, unmute game.
No, Kenneth and I go way back.
Okay, you guys can figure that out. Sounds like he's okay. Mr. Miss Myron. Okay, all right.
Oh, hang on. There was a chat that was sent. So can any of this money go towards prevention of murders on South First Street or implement recommendations from the city's CPTED study? CPTED.
It's pronounced septad.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's just a police acronym for reducing potential for danger.
Okay.
Watch
So
out.
that's something if the task force wanted to look into, we could also add this to the list. I don't see anyone else raising their hands. So I'm going to close public comment. Chris?
No, I'm just saying, I was waving goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye, Chris.
Bye, Pat.
Bye.
Bye, Kathy. Bye, Aaron. Bye, everybody else.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
So we're over.
Yeah.
We're over.
Okay.